Today, we're going to talk about how to let go of the past, how to start emptying out all past hurt, resentments, traumas from within your mind so that you can start to ultimately live more completely in the now, in the present. So you can improve the quality of your experience here and now so that you can start to live free from fear and the constant arising of your trauma in your day-to-day life situations, always in the form of some limitation and pain and suffering. So during today's video, I'm going to share with you multiple strategies that are going to help you become free from the past, let it go entirely, and start to live more and more so in the now. Know that everything that we discussed today is going to require your consistent practice. It's going to be difficult, but at the same time, very, very fun because it is so relieving. In the beginning, it is a practice and it seems like work, effort. But when you start to taste the freedom and the peace that it brings you, then you become really interested in these things. So, even though while we are discussing these things today, they may seem a little difficult to you and a little daunting at first, trust me, once you just start with even one thing, everything else becomes easier. And through consistent practice, you will find a greater and greater simplicity in this. Okay. So everything that I'm going to share with you today is something that I myself have practiced over the past few years and experienced for myself. So today I really sat down and jotted down a few notes about what are the best ways, what are the things that have worked the best for me to start to let go of my past and stop identifying with that story. So let's get into the first point. So, the first thing that is a very practical thing, it's not really like spiritual in nature or anything subtle. The most practical thing you can start doing to start letting go of the past is to spend more time alone. And this is so different than what you conventionally hear when people are trying to move on from something and feel more peaceful or happy. The general thing that we are taught to do is like, hey, surround yourself with your friends, go do things, go do more things, go expose yourself to this and that situation and this person, meet someone else, meet some more people. But this is only covering up your hurt. You're still full of the past, still full of attachments, still full of suffering. And to numb yourself from the pain of feeling those things, you are just covering them up with, like other people, other things, activities, constant distraction. So this is not the way. When I look through the at my life for the past few years, one of the things that has greatly served me, helped me let go of the past, but also just to start to grow in the understanding of who I truly am, personally and spiritually, and start to grow in the understanding of my own unique talents and interests, and start to discover an inner peace. None of that would have been possible without spending more time alone. Because you see, when you're alone, all your past stuff starts to arise. When the mind is not being distracted by more new stuff, the old stuff starts to replay in the mind in the form of thought and emotion. And usually this is very uncomfortable for people. That's why they run away from it. But if you make the habit of spending time with yourself and learn to face what arises within you, you start to see it without judgment. You start to outgrow identification with it. You see, then you start to become free from it. And so spending time alone previously was like a way of feeling lonely, and you hated that at all costs and you wanted to avoid it at all costs. But now it actually becomes like your avenue through which you transcend so many of your inner limitations, fears, resentments, past attachments. So the first thing is really just very practical, and it will incorporate all the other things that we're going to talk about today. The more, like, I'm not saying that you always have to be alone, but value alone time. Without valuing alone time, you'll always be in a state of distraction. Personal and spiritual growth comes from spending more time alone and really taking a deep inner look at the condition of your mind so that you can reflect, so that you can see what actually is true and not true, what actually is you and not you. So that's the first thing. Spend more time alone. Now, let's build on this. Notice that when you do tend to spend time alone, especially, the story of all the things of the past start to arise. Who hurt you, what they did wrong, why this thing and that thing shouldn't have happened to you. Well, it's almost like the story is like making you a victim of the things that have happened to you. So that's the thing we have to start to notice about the story. First of all, with every passing day, every time you rethink of the story of what happened to you, every time that story, without your noticing of it, is a little different and far removed from the reality of things as they actually were. It starts to just like, like when you play that telephone game with your friends, you start, one person whispers in another person's ear, and then the second person says the thing to the next person based on what they think they have heard. Every time you rethink of what has happened in the past, it is a distorted idea, which keeps on getting more and more distorted. You're not necessarily thinking of what actually happened. You're thinking of the last time you thought about that thing that actually happened. Once again, so it's not an idea about what happened. It's an idea about an idea of what happened. And then it just keeps on getting more and more distorted, more and more like in like away from truth. So although you may say like, hey, I have a very clear memory of what happened and this person did this to me. I get that to a certain degree. I'm sure that's what happened. However, the mind emphasizes the hurt aspect of it more and more in its stories. So the more and more you think about what happened, the more you are keeping the hurt alive within you, and you are growing that hurt. So notice that the thing that happened to you and maybe hurt you, or the person that you have a resentment towards, like all that whole situation came and went. But the hurt that it caused you continues to live on within you. Why? Because of that constant dwelling in the story of it. The dwelling in the story about what happened and constantly recreating that hurt is what is keeping that hurt alive. So what you need to work on, and something that I did, it was really hard, but it's something that I really had to grow in the practice of, is starting to let go of living in the mental commentary about what happened in the past and why I am the way I am, or why this person shouldn't have acted this way, or that situation shouldn't have happened. Let go of all of that for the moment, for this moment. You see, if you want to stop living in the past and you want to start living more in the now, then you have to actually make an effort towards it. The now is always here waiting for you, but we are too lost in the past. So we have to step down from our mental story, our mental commentary, to the now. In the now, there is no hurt, there is no resentment, there is no fear. The moment we step into the past, into the story, once again, fear, hurt, all these things become alive. So the more we step down from the story, we step down from hurt. The more we step down away from the story, you'll notice gradually that the hurt just starts to die within you. In the beginning, your mind will say, oh, but that's just me ignoring things the way they happened. Is that really true? It's so funny that we say this, that letting go of constantly thinking about the past and coming to the present is like a bad thing. That is ignoring or resisting reality. Isn't that so backwards? Notice how when you are actually constantly thinking about life, how it was and how it shouldn't have been, You are in resistance to life as it actually is here and now. Being in the now is the greatest form of acceptance, the greatest involvement in life, the greatest embrace of life as it is. Whereas constantly being in the story about life and how it should be and how it should not have been and what shouldn't have happened to you, that is a resistance to life. That is an avoidance of life as it actually is. And that's why it feels so painful, because you are in conflict with life as it actually is, because you're always dwelling in the story. So start to see it the opposite way, which is much more in alignment with the truth. Stepping down from thoughts is you coming into alignment with life actual as it actually is, and it starts to dissolve the pain within you of the past. Whereas dwelling in it only keeps it alive furthermore. So let's move on. Now, we're stepping out of the story, but what you need to start doing more consciously is learn to feel the emotions that are associated to your past. So notice that when you are thinking thoughts about the past, there are certain associated emotions that come along with that. These emotions don't only arise when you're thinking about the past actively, they actually also arise in day to day life situations. Things that had been triggered because of something that happened to you in the past now get triggered in the present moment when maybe a similar thing happens to you, or right, like something else totally unrelated even happens and it triggers that same emotion. It's like it becomes a pattern, it becomes a theme of your life. So what you have to start doing is, now that you're learning to step out of the story, the emotions are still going to arise and they're going to feel very real. And instantly you want to fight them, you want to resist them, you want to run away from them, you want to change them. You don't want to feel this way. That's why people hate being alone too, because all the past emotions and all that stuff, they start coming up. I invite you to make a habit of learning to face the emotions which arise. Again, it sounds daunting at first, but you will find that it is the most liberating thing you'll ever do. And you'll realize that emotions aren't harmful. Even the feeling of sadness, when you just feel it without mental commentary, without judgment, without resistance, it's just a feeling. It's like a different flavor of life. You are able to feel into even anger. That's what I invite you to do. Feel the emotions like anger, resentment, hurt, pain, without the story around it. And the way that you experience those emotions completely changes. You start to find that actually what was even more painful is actually the story, is living and dwelling in this constant commentary, ideas. Whereas the actual emotion, I'm able to just feel into, I'm able to just breathe into and embrace and accept and become open to. And you'll start to notice that when you do this, when you just start to feel openly without resistance, the resistance in you dies. It starts to fade away. And then the emotion also just fades away. And it stops arising in you with that great intensity, because it needs resistance from you in order to arise as intensely. Your resistance feeds it, and it feeds the story also with the charge. But when you just learn to step out of the story and just start to feel and embrace and face all of the emotions, then the whole charge begins to die out. It is miraculous. Imagine a reality where, like, you can experience anger peacefully, where you can allow anger to arise and not be so shaken by it, shook by it. That is possible for you. You have to explore that superpower of yours. It starts by learning to feel all emotions without the story, without the desire to change or manipulate. So little by little, this just starts to remove all hurt, the feeling of being broken, traumatized. You have to see that trauma and hurt only live within you as emotion and thought. When you start to feel emotion, your resistance and suffering towards it starts to vanish and the charge begins to die out. When the charge begins to die out, the story also begins to die out. It's not like you'll forget what happened. You'll still remember what happened, but it won't be so painful for you anymore. It won't be like a scar. It will just be another thing that happened to you, which you learn from. So that brings us to the next point. Spend more and more time in the now. So, when we said spend more time alone, when you're alone, spend more and more time here and now. And this goes hand in hand with the letting go of dwelling in the story. When you're not dwelling in the story, you're just present. In the light of your presence, the whole story will begin to fade away. The whole hurt, all your past attachments and hurts and traumas will start to fade away. Your presence is the most powerful thing. Your observing, your consciousness is so powerful. It is like a light which consumes all darkness. So when you start to spend more time in the present, all this past hurt, resentments, they just begin to fade away. Again, you will remember what happened first, but like you won't think about it constantly. Like let's say a dinner you had a month ago, you don't think of that. When you think about it, you will remember it maybe. If something like anything of value happened in there, maybe you had a nice meal, you'll be like, oh yeah, that was nice. But it's like that doesn't arise again and again for you. Like the meaning it holds for you, the emotional attachment you have towards it's not there. So similar with like a memory of your past, you will remember it and it will be like, oh yeah, that happened. But it won't have an emotional charge and you won't derive a sense of identity from it. This is super important. It can only start happening if you live in the now rather than constantly dwelling in the past. Just know this: presence consumes all suffering. Your suffering cannot exist in the light of your presence. Test this out against all odds. It will not fail you. I promise you. This was one of my greatest discoveries, as I began treading the spiritual path. It's all about presence. The more you can, quote unquote, spend time in presence, the more it will consume all your suffering, your delusion, your wrong ideas about life, your insecurities, your resentments, attachments, everything. It is the greatest miracle. And that's another thing, when we think about like letting go of past and like self-healing, we think it's like such a hard thing to do. And of course it is difficult, but actually it is very simple in nature. It doesn't require you to do so many different things. It's like becoming more aware. Notice that all the things we're talking about today it's just about becoming more aware. Through greater awareness, we grow both personally and spiritually. It is the secret. It is the key to unlock all doors. So the next thing is learning to understand this very, very important point, that what happened is exactly what needed to happen for your personal and spiritual growth. And that the mind is very short-sighted. It only sees and reacts to things as they are right now. It doesn't actually see things in the long term. Whereas you have noticed for yourself things that you previously perceived to be such negative things that when they happened to you, you were like so like resisting them and hating them. They ended up becoming one of your greatest blessings. It's similar to my path. I had a spinal injury when I was 16, and it was the worst thing that happened to me for many years. It was my greatest enemy, my biggest problem. But gradually, it revealed a whole new life to me. It revealed to me the spiritual path. It revealed to me all of these teachings that today I share with you. And in that way, of course, it was like a problem, but it turned into my greatest blessing, you see? And if I hadn't encountered that situation, that problem, which was absolutely horrific at that time, I would have never come across these teachings. Or maybe I would have come across them and not been receptive to them because I wasn't in a state of suffering. I didn't need them. You see, like because I was in a state of deep suffering, I was open to changing my views on life. I was open to doing something new that I wouldn't have been open to doing otherwise. So that is the thing you have to see. Don't just identify with the judgmental, reactive mind. The very things that you say shouldn't have happened to you, that you think were your greatest problems and enemies, that you wish you could have avoided, those are the very reasons you're watching this video right now. More, you see, life is that way. In every situation, no matter how bad it is, there is a greater opportunity for good. That's just the goodness of life. It's just like the pure potential of life. In everything lies the potential of discovery, an opportunity that the mind doesn't see in that very moment. So, like now, you have the power to start seeing your past in this way. That what needed to happen is what happened. You may not have liked it, and it may not have been as pleasant. It still may not be pleasant for you, but because of it, you are growing in ways you couldn't have grown otherwise. So, I look at all my problems and challenges as my teachers, as a blessing from God or life. And this isn't like a fluffy perspective to put on things and it's like a band aid. No, you will see that this truly changes the way you perceive your problems, perceive the things that happened to you in the past. And you won't have that inner resistance towards them anymore. It's such a simple thing, but this perspective shift creates a vast opening in you. And not only does it help you see things that happened to you in the past in a different way, but also helps you deal with the problems and challenges of today when they arise. When you adopt this perspective, then you are able to, rather than accumulating more and more hurt from current things that are happening to you and problems that are coming your way, you start to use those problems for your personal and spiritual growth. And in this way, rather than just you getting weighed down with a burden of hurt and trauma and attachments, you actually start to use the very problems that previously were adding all that stuff onto you to start becoming free from them. This is the beauty of the spiritual path. Through changing the perspective that you look at life through, that you look at problems through, now problems become the avenue for your growth. You see? Again, these might sound daunting when you're hearing them all at the same time, but I promise, even if you just start beginning, if you start to practice one of these things, it will help you practice all of these things. Because as I said, all of these things are really ultimately one thing, growing in self-awareness. Okay, so let's cover the last thing. And this one's going to be hard for you to grasp, maybe, or accept. But start to see that whatever you're clinging on to, that like, oh, this person shouldn't have done this or whatever, and whoever you hold resentments again towards, understand that everybody is always doing their best in every situation. I'm not saying that what they did maybe to you wasn't right. No, may have been wrong, but Everybody is always acting according to their knowledge. You also, by accident, hurt people sometimes. And it's because in those moments, you don't know any better. Even in the moments where you think you know better and you act against that and you still hurt someone. Let's say someone purposely hurts you, right? And you say they knew better. But in that moment, they are not aware that acting in this way will create suffering for them and others. They think it may create suffering for others, but they are internally convinced that acting in that way will create happiness for them. They're maybe completely blind to the fact that creating suffering for others will also create suffering for them, and they are completely blind to the fact that this action creates suffering for everyone involved. But it is that this unconscious belief that, hey, acting in this way will create happiness. That's why we do it. We are blind in that moment. And so this is what we have to start understanding about everybody. Everybody's always acting to get happiness. It's just that their ways of getting happiness are often limited and wrong. You see, let me give you an example. Let's say someone says something mean to you and it makes you really angry. And in that moment, that anger is trying to convince you that, hey, hurt this person back. Try to get back at them, because you feel that so the motive of anger is happiness. In that moment, you feel that, hey, me inflicting this hurt back upon the other person, getting revenge, is what will create happiness, healing. So the motive of anger is happiness too, but it is just misguided. It is just illusory. So when people hurt you, they're also it's just due to lack of knowledge. It's lack of spiritual knowledge, what we in spiritual teachings call ignorance. And so we just have to start to see this limitation of everybody. And I'm not saying that you have to love them for it, but just forgive them for it, because you will have many instances in your life where you will unconsciously hurt other people. Sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. But even when you're doing it knowingly, you are under the impression that's like it's somehow creating happiness for you. And you come to realize that later that it doesn't. So you have to just see that, like, in every moment, everybody's doing their best, knowingly or unknowingly. And I can forgive everybody involved, everybody else, including myself. So you don't need to, one of the main things about letting go of the past is like letting go of constantly judging your own self, holding resentments against your own self. I could have done better. No, you couldn't have. What happened is exactly what needed to happen and how it needed to happen for the sake of everybody's personal and spiritual growth, not for the sake of everybody's pleasure, because of course we come across many situations in our lives which are unpleasant, but it is for your spiritual growth, your personal growth. If you just start to see it in this way, then you can just let go of all these resentments. You can forgive everybody, you can forgive yourself, and then you can just start living your best life here and now. A peaceful life. A life where you are more and more here and now, rather than lost in ideas about the past. So let's just quickly do a summary. First thing we said, to start letting go of the past, start spending more time alone by yourself. It is time by yourself that will allow you to practice any of these things and grow in self-awareness. If you're constantly distracted, you cannot grow in self-awareness. You'll be always in a state of distraction, compulsion, suffering. Number 2, you have to let go of dwelling in the story. Story keeps the hurt alive within you. Letting go of the story gets rid of the hurt. Third, learn to feel the emotions associated to your past. They don't only arise when you're thinking about the story, they also arise in day-to-day situations here and now. When those emotions get triggered, feel them openly, without resistance. Spend more and more time in the now. Presence consumes all darkness, all hurt, all trauma. Test this against all odds. You will not be disappointed. What happened is exactly what needed to happen for your personal and spiritual growth. Don't be so short-sighted. Don't react with the mind, you see? Don't buy into the mind's reactions and resistances. Let things unfold. See that even your problems are your greatest blessings. Allow them to turn into your greatest blessings by seeing them as opportunities for spiritual growth rather than your enemies. And also come to acceptance of what happened in the past because of this, and it will become your greatest blessing. And realize that everybody involved always is doing their best. Knowing this, forgive them, forgive yourself. If you start to incorporate even one of these, you will start to naturally incorporate all of these. And as you start to incorporate all of these and live your life by these principles, you will start to become free from living in the past. You'll start to let go of the past and start to live more and more here and now. And you will derive a sense of identity from hurt and trauma less and less. And you'll start to feel like your authentic, free self again, like you used to when you were a child. Doing this work alone is difficult, so if you need support in these practices, join our free support group. And if you need a lot of guidance and support and you want more structure, learn more about our self-inquiry school. I hope this video helped you. I'll see you next time.